All right, let's talk about training a machine learning model. You can think of it like sending the model on a journey, right? It's trying to find the lowest point in this huge, hilly landscape of errors. And the learning rate? Well, that's just the size of the steps it takes. But here's the thing. What if the terrain changes? What if you need big, bold steps at the beginning and then smaller, more careful steps near the end? That's exactly what we're going to explore today, how to dynamically change our step size for a smarter, faster journey.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll get into why just sticking with one learning rate can be a real problem. Then we'll check out some really clever strategies to fix that. After that, we're going to clear up something that trips a lot of people up: iterations versus epochs. And finally, we'll see how you can actually put all this theory into practice using TensorFlow.
Okay, let's dive right in. The first big hurdle we have to deal with when we're training is what I call the learning rate dilemma. It's all about finding that Goldilocks step size. Not too big, not too small, but just right. And that's a totally fair question. I mean, why make things so complicated? Well, imagine you're trying to walk to the lowest point in a really foggy valley. When you're way up high on a gentle slope, you can take these big, confident steps, no problem. But as you get closer to the bottom, the ground gets a lot trickier. If you keep taking those huge steps, you're just going to leap right over the lowest point and end up climbing the other side. And this really gets to the heart of the trade-off. If you have a high learning rate, like we see on the left, your model just completely overshoots the best solution. It ends up bouncing back and forth like crazy, and the training becomes totally unstable. But on the other hand, if you go with a really low learning rate, oh man, the training is just painfully slow. And what's worse, it can get stuck in a little divot, a local minimum, and never find the true best solution.
So, the big takeaway here is that the perfect step size actually changes as you train. The solution? We use what are called dynamic decay strategies. The idea is simple. We start with a higher learning rate, and then, over time, we gradually decrease it. So let's look at a few of the most popular ways to do this. First up, we've got staircase decay. You can think of this one like manually shifting gears in a car. You let the model train at one speed for a while, and then, at a very specific point that you decide, you drop the rate down to a new, lower level. The thing to really notice here is just how manual this is. You're the one defining the specific boundaries and the new rates. And yeah, that gives you a ton of control, but it also means you might have to do a lot of trial and error to figure out the best schedule for your particular problem. Now, a more automated and, frankly, simpler version of this is step decay. So instead of you having to manually set new rates at all these different points, we just reduce the current rate by a fixed percentage, and we do it at regular intervals. So here's how it works in practice. You pick a decay step. That's a set number of iterations, and a decay factor, something like 0.5. Then every time the model finishes that many iterations, the learning rate just gets multiplied by that factor. It's a much easier, more predictable way to get that step-down pattern, and honestly, it's a great, super reliable starting point for a lot of models. Next up is inverse time decay. Now, this approach is a lot gentler. Instead of these sudden drops, the learning rate goes down smoothly with every single iteration. So you're slowing the model down gradually as it gets deeper and deeper into the training. You can see it in the formula here. The learning rate is just the initial rate divided by a number that keeps growing with each iteration. What this does is it causes a pretty sharp drop right at the beginning of training, which then flattens out. So the decreases get smaller and smaller later on, which makes it a really solid choice for those really long, extended training sessions. And finally, we have exponential decay. This is another smooth and continuous method, but it acts a little differently. With this one, the learning rate gets reduced by a constant fraction at every single step, which creates that classic, smooth exponential curve. Here's a way to think about it. If step decay has a scheduled check-in every few thousand iterations to slow things down, exponential decay slows down just a tiny, tiny bit after every single iteration. It's often seen as one of the most effective methods, and for a lot of deep learning problems, it's a fantastic default choice because it just smoothly and quickly helps the model zero in on a good solution. Okay, so we've been using this word iteration a lot. And to really implement any of these decay strategies correctly, we have to be absolutely crystal clear on the difference between an iteration and an epoch. Seriously, this is a super common point of confusion. So this is a big question, right? When does the decay part of learning rate decay actually happen? Is it after the model has seen all of the data one time? The short answer is no, and the reason why is super important.
First things first, let's define an epoch. An epoch is simply one full cycle, one complete pass where your model has seen every single sample in your training data exactly once. So if you have 60,000 images, one epoch is done after the model has trained on all 60,000 of them. Simple as that. An iteration, on the other hand, well, that's the fundamental step of learning. It's that one moment when the model looks at a small batch of data, calculates the error, and updates its weights. That's when the learning rate actually gets used. So one epoch is made up of many, many iterations. Let's make this super concrete with an example. Take the Zalando Fashion MNSD dataset. It's got 60,000 images. If our batch size is 50, then to get through all that data just once, that's one epoch, remember, the model needs to do 1,200 separate weight updates. That's 1,200 iterations. And here's the crucial part, the thing you absolutely have to remember. Learning rate decay is almost always applied per iteration, not per epoch. All right, so we've covered the why and the how. Now let's get down to business and see how you can actually implement these learning rate decay schedules when you're building models in a framework like TensorFlow. Because this is always the next logical question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand the math and the concepts, but it's another thing entirely to translate that into working code without having to build all those formulas from scratch. Well, the good news is you don't have to. TensorFlow gives us a whole bunch of built-in functions to do this. You've got exponential underscore decay and inverse time decay, which we just talked about. For those staircase or step decay methods, you'd use piecewise underscore constant. And there are even others, like polynomial decay, so you have plenty of options to play around with. And that brings us to a final, pretty interesting question. Have we just replaced the single problem of picking a learning rate with a whole new set of choices? You know, which decay strategy should I use? What's the best initial rate? What's the rate decay factor? In a way, we've kind of traded one tuning problem for another, more complex one. But you know what? It's a trade that, when you get it right, gives you models that are so much more powerful and efficient. And that's our look at dynamic learning rates. Hey, if you found this useful, do me a favor and hit that like button, share it, and subscribe for more explainers on topics just like this. Thanks for watching.